Why did Gon get so angry about Kite, a guy he barely knew? This line of thinking is probably the most common misconception in the whole of Hunter x Hunter. Not only do we know that Kite was someone that Gon looked up to ever since he was a child, we are also constantly told by Togashi throughout the show that all Gon needed to flip out like this was one single death of someone he considers a friend. For today, I wanted to look at one of the biggest moments of foreshadowing of this transformation that rarely gets spoken about. Genthru vs Gon is probably the most underappreciated fight in the entirety of Hunter x Hunter. First of all, it comes in an arc that is pretty much unanimously accepted as the worst major arc in the show. This doesn't mean that it is a bad arc, just that it is not as amazing as the other ones, at least in the general opinion. It also doesn't help Greed Island's case that it is sandwiched between two of the best arcs in the anime. However, I feel like the Gon vs Genthru fight is an unfair victim of this, as honestly even I forgot it when I first watched Hunter x Hunter. There are so many moving parts in this show that it is easy to forget a fight in Greed Island, especially when the arc had two peaks instead of the usual one. When we think Greed Island, we think of the dodgeball game, not Gon vs the Bomber. However, when I was watching the fight for the first time, it was amazing, and more than anything, this fight told us a lot about Gon's character as a whole, and it foreshadows Gon's transformation in a number of ways. Starting at the beginning of this wonderful fight, Gon makes Genthru promise him that whoever loses the fight would have to give up their cars to the other person. At first, Genthru is annoyed by this offer and tells Gon he isn't in a position to make wagers with him, and he obviously plans to take the cars by force. However, Gon immediately tells Genthru that if he doesn't agree to this wager, he will never open his binder again, even if it kills him. Now obviously the Bomber cannot get Gon's cars unless Gon opens his binder, and so the Bomber reluctantly agrees to Gon's wager. The craziest part about this for me isn't necessarily what Gon said. Anybody can claim that they would rather die than give up, but the crazy part about this is how quickly Genthru believes him. He doesn't once try to call his bluff. A second ago he was 100% ready to forcefully take Gon's cards from him, but just from the sheer conviction of Gon's words, he immediately knows he is not lying and has already accepted that forcing Gon to open the binder is no longer an option. He couldn't believe the lack of value Gon put on his own life, and he even stopped to call him a lunatic before accepting his offer. If anybody else would have said this to him, he would have undoubtedly called their bluff. You could argue that this sequence shows Gon's courage, but in reality this really showed how quickly and easily Gon will put his goals above his own life. I mean, the fight barely started and he is already putting his life on the line if the Bomber doesn't comply. The second part of the fight that I want to talk about again highlights Gon's lack of self-worth. This one isn't necessarily as clear of a sign as the first, but as Gon is fighting the Bomber, we get glimpses of Bisky planning this fight, in which he tells Gon that he is going to get a beating as part of the plan. Going into a fight you know you're going to lose is simply putting the mission above yourself. However, I say this isn't as clear cut, as it's not like Bisky is ordering him to to die, and I'm sure there are many characters that would take a beating in order to win a fight. However, this is when it gets really interesting. Fighting someone you can't beat for the sake of a plan is one thing, but fighting someone you cannot beat and risking your own death for the sake of your pride is another thing entirely. When the bomber tells Gon that he does not need to use his ability because he is so much weaker than him, Gon literally puts his life on the line because his pride is hurt. He says that he cannot stand to be treated as a weakling and starts putting the plan on hold to accept a vicious beating by the bomber in order to force him to finally use his ability. I'm going to improvise. How can I not try if I have such a great idea? When you hear this, you would probably assume that a person is talking about trying a different method of solving a problem. So when you hear that Gon is improvising, you assume that he has thought of a better way of beating the bomber. But in reality, all he has thought of is a way to land a single hit. Not to win, not even to land a decisive hit, but just to land a single hit. Okay, well, this should be fine. I mean, it is a fight after all. If there is a way to ensure that you can land a hit and continue with the plan, go for it, right? But no. Even this is too good to be true. Gon isn't landing a hit here to help the plan go well. He is instead risking the plan to land it.
両腕を同時に爆破する。無事に残しておきたい方を行で守れ。その次に残った方の腕と左足を同時に爆破する。残したい方を行で守れ。くらえ。ダメージ。じゃん。何が起きた？わかったぞ。このガキ！両手を捨てやがった！右手を攻防力30程度のオーラで追い、残りの攻防力70を足に集中させて、俺を攻撃した！
He literally accepts the loss of his arm, a key part in completing the plan and obviously an important part of him. I mean, it's literally his arm, all to land just one single, barely significant hit. The shock in the bomber's face says it all. This isn't about him putting his mission over his life anymore. Now his pride is above his own life too. Not only that, he stops following the plan at this point, which is putting quite literally all of his friends that he made in Greed Island at risk. The plan that Tezgera and the others worked so hard to make possible, that so many died and were hurt for, Gon risked all of that because his pride was hurt. If Gon dies here, they lose everything. The despicable bomber wins the game and is able to wish for anything he wants in the real world. He would also probably go on a revenge tour and murder many people. Gon risked all of this because his pride was hurt. But why? It's simple. What do you think a child abandoned by even his own father for no apparent reason thinks of himself? Do you think he values himself or his life? Why would he? The one person in the world that should care for him unconditionally abandoned him. Is it because he isn't worth it? Is he that much of a burden? These are all things that Gon constantly feels, which forms his inferiority complex. So when someone hurts his pride by saying that he is infinitely weaker than them, he simply has to prove to everyone and especially to himself that he is worth something. He does this by obsessing over doing everything perfectly and never making a mistake. Only then will he feel justified in feeling that he isn't a weak, worthless child that his father abandoning him may have suggested. We see this inferiority complex show itself throughout the show, but this is definitely one of the strongest cases. In any case, to risk your life not because you think you have a chance of winning a fight, but because you want your opponent to use an ability on you is nothing short of insanity. Not only is there physical foreshadowing here with Gon losing his arm, much like the way he loses his arm post-transformation, but there are also signs that Gon was always somewhat unhinged. The biggest of these signs is the inferiority complex that I just spoke about, which shows itself yet again in the Chimera Ant arc and is a huge reason that this transformation even took place. Yes, the transformation happened because of how angry Gon was at Pitou, but even more than that, he was angry at himself. He was disappointed in his weakness. His life revolved around constantly proving his worth to someone to try to make sense of his father's abandonment. So now when he sees Kite dead, he thinks back to the scene of the death, and the seeds of self-hate that Ging planted in him begin to grow. If I wasn't there, Kite would be alive. Maybe this is why Ging didn't want me. Maybe I was worthless. Maybe I wasn't.
これで終わってもいい。
Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe because more content like this is coming soon.